Hey there, this is Dan. You're watching The Salty Sea, and today I am going to talk about the 8 points. I am going to get into every single Chaos First Edition Bespoke faction because these are the ones that started it all. Also, shout out to my Patreon. Matt said, he just mentioned that he is one of the British, what was it he said? I think he might have just said bespoke enjoyers that I like to poke fun at in my videos. And apologies if you felt poked fun at, everyone. I love these warbands. I love the people who play them a lot, even though you can't find them in stores anymore. Well, a couple of them you can, but you can't find most of them in stores anymore. I still think they're really sweet. And this video is going to be showing how to build each one of them in a way that a lot of them, even the very best versions, aren't going to win any kind of tournament with a lot of people who kind of play competitively. But building builds of them that make sense, that work, that are going to be functional, and that you could bring to any event, you know, casual or competitive, and you're at least playing Warcry and you're going to win a couple games. So I'm pretty excited for this project, and let's get into it. I'm going to start with Untamed Beasts. These were one of the two starter box warbands. They're the one that I fell in love with first. I love Untamed Beasts. The first thing you need to know about Prey Taker or Untamed Beasts is that Prey Takers are ick. They need either 2 more wounds or fewer points or something. Take out every Prey Taker and switch it for 2 Plains Runners when you first get this warband. The trick for building it is you can either play First Fang or you can play the cat combo, but you can't really play both. You have to stay focused when you're building, especially when you're building these lists, these bespoke warbands that have like a couple gimmicks, neither of which are all that powerful or busted, but both of which are at least like they kind of do something cool on the tabletop. You really need to only have one of them and then have the rest of your list be very kind of straightforward, to allow your fancy thing to actually be fancy, as opposed to just you're getting absolutely destroyed on numbers and beef all over the board and you can't do anything to hurt anything. You know, if you want to get fancy, you have to also have your nuts and bolts covered. So me personally, I prefer the Beast Speaker. It's awesome because it's on a double, which the going rate for a bonus action is a double these days, so you are kind of getting your value that way. The First Fang is okay, but the ability is on a triple. You do get a little bit more juice than you get for most buffs with the First Fang, with most pulls with the First Fang to upgrade to a triple. But the going rate for a triple is 2 doubles because, you know, you have a wild dice. If you roll a double, you can spend it to upgrade to a triple, or you can spend it to make another double. And so if they cost the same to create, you want your triples to be worth more. You know, maybe the going rate is 1.9 doubles because sometimes you just roll a triple, but really you want your triples to be significantly better than a double, and the little bit extra juice you get, the First Fang attack that you get is just not good enough. It also non-bows with Deathbringer because you're not going to do 2 triples in a round very often. Beast Speaker, though, can also give its doubles to Thralls, which is really sweet, and it's the inspiration to what I would be most excited to build with them, which is Thrall of the Wild. Heart Eater, Raptorix, 2 Plains Runners in one, Beast Speaker, Chaos Spawn, and a Plains Runner in another, and then Aspiring Champion and 2 Plains Runners in one more. It's possible that the best way to play them is just a Heart Eater, a Varangard, and then a million Plains Runners, but we're not going to do that here. Part of the genesis for this video, again, shout out to the Patreon, love you guys, and everyone should consider joining. I'll put the link down below. But the genesis for this video is the fact that for a long time, the answer to how to build a bespoke was just put in a FOMO Crusher. In fact, I've got my lovely FOMO Crusher right here. I still love him. He'll go in a bespoke again sometime, but man, was he a loser out of the Onslaught Rampage nerf. I don't know if you can play FOMO Crushers anymore. But Varangard is kind of the new thing that you could just stick a Varangard into every single one of these bespokes and make it better. But people tend to be a little bit resistant to that. I think that flavor-wise, it's kind of cool. Like, I just read the Abraxia novel, and Varangards are all over the place, and they are often leading small warbands to go do a little thing here or a little thing there. And so having a bespoke faction tagging along with a Varangard, especially because of their connection to Archaon, I think works really well. I love that I'm doing this spiel while we're all looking at old Harrison Ford here. But I could just put a Varangard into every list, and half of those lists would be better than the ones I'm going to post here. But instead, I'm going to show different ways you can build them that are still, pretty functional on the board, and we're not going to have a single repeat in any of the allies we use. So what we're doing here, the Chaos Spawn, of course, has similar output to the Untamed Beast Cat, but it's just cheaper. 20 points is a lot to work with, and you can do a lot of other things in your list with those 20 points. The Aspiring Champion is really nice for Untamed Beasts because it gives them a plan versus T6, and it's also a nice sort of holding piece, some staying power for cheap. Planesrunners are a reasonable deal at 55 points, but they are only 8 wounds, 3 toughness, and so they do die very quickly. You're happy with them because they are so cheap, but you need to supplement them with something that doesn't die so quickly, and that's the Aspiring Champion's job. Then you have the Raptorix, which is just another thing that the Beast Speaker can give a bonus attack to. It also can get the reaction. The reaction is really cool. It can work with the Aspiring Champion or the Heart Eater. I haven't put the Chaos Spawn with either of those because I think you should probably focus on trying to give it bonus attacks. But if you wanted to, you could drop the Chaos Spawn for another Raptorix and get 1,000,000 Planesrunners, and then put the Chaos Spawn with the Aspiring Champion and have a really crazy combo, something like that, where you're guaranteed to get the reaction if they come near. But it's really hard to pull that off, in my opinion. Most of the time, your opponents are just not going to come at you, and so it's going to change how your opponent plays, but it's not actually going to happen. So I don't think you should try to focus on it. I think you should focus on getting value in general. I think cockamamie magical plans tend not to work as well as just getting good value in a proactive manner in Warcry. And so that's how I think you should play this list. But if you wanted to, you could switch that Planesrunner for the Aspiring Champion and have your dagger be super skewed. Some events will let you kind of do that with, how the deployments are set up. Now let's get into Splintered Fang. They're kind of similar to Untamed Beasts. They're just a little worse. Their combo is on a triple instead of a double, so it's not really something you're going to build around. It's just some fun juice for when you first get your open box. The reason they did that, though, was because on release, snakes were completely busted, and the fact that you could give them extra attacks was really good. You could bring your snake in, do 1,000,000 damage, give it another attack, and so if you had a bunch of Clear Bloods and a bunch of snakes, and snakes were cheap enough that you could spam them and have activation advantage with them, and it was not good. It was not a good situation. But the True Blood is still untouched, still a classic. It is a guaranteed net. The easiest way to exploit that is to just have enough range to just hit them while they're stuck there. It's not very nice, but it is something that that Splintered Fang are pretty good at doing. They have a lot of extra reach in their warband, and so that can be kind of a nice way to exploit certain warbands that don't have a lot of range to or any shooting. That's kind of what I'm going to build around because I think 2-inch reach is just kind of generally good in the game, and so then having that extra little exploit with it is nice. For Clear Bloods, which one you should use, if you're spamming a ton of them, I think you should use the Blades, because then your plan is to kind of wait a few times and then collapse and then put a bunch of little attacks onto one enemy. Whereas if you're only using a few of them, I think you should use Shields because you really want to just have a couple of them standing on points, and you really just don't want them to die in one hit, and the shields just gives you a little bit better chance to survive. The battle trait is super sweet. Unfortunately, Pure Bloods and the Venom Blood with Blades are just way overcosted, and those are the two fighters who combo with it because they actually deal more than 1 damage on a regular hit, not crit. And if they were better, I would absolutely deliver you a battle trait version, but not going to do that because they are not good, and I am not going to steer people towards things that are not functional on the tabletop. So this is my version of Splintered Fang. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but whips and chains excite me. This is a tribute to Rihanna, even though I don't think, if Rihanna played Warcry, I don't think she would play Splintered Fang, but Splintered Fang are still her biggest fans. The True Blood is tying them down, and then we're hitting them with whips. The Venom Bloods, we have the regular Venom Blood with the whip and shield, and we have the Venom Blood Elf with the whip. So a bunch of 3-inch reach here. The Ogroid Myrmidon with +1 attack still does work. I know I just said that FOMO Crusher is unplayable, but Myrmidon has a little more juice to him because he can give a bonus attack on a triple. This Warband doesn't necessarily exploit that all that well, but it's still worthwhile to have kind of in your pocket. It's pretty good on the True Blood. It's not that great on anything else. But that Myrmidon has 2-inch reach, which is really nice. You could, if you wanted to, bring like the Spear Varengard too, if you were a little crazy. But yeah, so 315 points for that is kind of worth it because being able to brawl is still just as valuable as it was before. It's just that fewer people can do it and it's harder to do. So the Ogroid Myrmidon running around with 4 attacks that all do 4-8 damage each is still just like a terrifying thing for people to have to deal with. So even though it's a lot worse than it used to be, it's in a world where it was pretty decent before, and also fewer people are bringing kind of rivals for it. So then after we have the big range damage on the 3 whips and the Myrmidon, then we bring in the Clear Bloods. They are just there to kind of hold points, do errands. You have 20 points left over here for either a Strength Blessing or a +4 Wounds Blessing. You could do that on the True Blood, for example, to make sure that she stays alive in order to tie people down. That's where I would put it, but you could really do it anywhere. I like here that the nets are going to be the whips are going to be pretty good at staying alive. You can tie things up with Clear Bloods and then whip them with nets, things like that. And this is pretty cool. You can also replace Myrmidon with the Spheranx, and you're a little bit more on theme, right? Because the Spheranx has a net. But I think you're better off kind of needing the output because that Myrmidon is going to do a lot of damage for you. Now we're into Spire Tyrants. These were some of the biggest losers from the Onslaught and Rampage change, unfortunately. Their whole playstyle was they had nets, they had the Bestigor that was incredible at onslaughting, and then you would just bring in a good rampaging ally, and boom, you had a pretty competitive warband. Spire Tyrants were actually one of the better bespokes, definitely, top 2, top 3. But that's not really happening anymore because the Bestigor is a lot worse now that it can't onslaught. A lot of the kind of classic Chaos Titans that you would put with it are kind of not as good anymore, but it's still valuable. You kind of play them just a little bit different way now. So they still have those nets. They're just valuable now with kind of dice hungry allies because you won't be onslaughting, so you can kind of bring in an ally who wants to use dice. The biggest question when you're building with this warband is, do you want to have Headclaimer or Bestigor? You can't really afford to have 2 mid-range somewhat damagey pieces like that, but having 1 can be really effective in most lists. So if you're only going to have 1, the Headclaimer is a little less swingy. They average out to do about the same amount of damage. Just the Bestigor, it spikes more and it also whiffs more, essentially. The Bestigor is +3 wounds for 10 points. So that's a pretty good trade, but it's no longer a no-brainer because it used to be the Bestigor went so much crazier with Onslaught that you just always took the Bestigor and you didn't think twice about it, right? Now I think it's much more of a debate. I think the Headclaimer has a much bigger or a much better claim than it used to, whereas the Bestigor I think still is a tiny bit better, but if you were trying to put things in your list and you were having a tough time making room, dropping your Bestigor for a Headclaimer is now like a completely defensible thing to do, whereas before it wasn't. I also think that, it's only a 5-point nerf, but 175 points for a +1A Bestigor instead of 170 is just a bit tougher sell now. Deathbringers and Chaos Lords are both only 5 points more expensive than that, and so why bring the Blessed Bestigor when you could get, a piece that can win a game? The battle trait is your strength equals their toughness for 1 fighter per round. It's a lot like the Splintered Fang one. Unfortunately, it's not really worth building around, in my opinion. Your damage dealers are already strength 5, so not only do you already hit on what you want to, it just doesn't work out. Like, I think it's only worth it if you just play against nothing but Stormcast. Then it's worth it to bring the battle trait. But if you are just going to play into a normal meta, I wouldn't use it. So here's a very gambling version of Spire Tyrants. You bring your Pit Champ, you bring a Bulgor with 2 axes, you bring a Deathbringer, a Bestigor Destroyer, 3 Pit Fighters with net, and 1 regular Pit Fighter. This is actually a pretty competitive warband. Deathbringers are really scary. The Bulgor with 2 axes has that bonus double or like a bonus move on a double in round 1. So anytime it starts on the board, you can do really crazy things with it. And so then you have the Deathbringer triple. So those 2 can kind of happily use all your dice. The Bulgor also has a bonus action on hit ability, which is really good. But then, they're really well supported with nets as well. A really common use of a net is just like you net something that's sort of set up somewhere where the Deathbringer can't get to it, and then you kind of sidle up and you plan to kill it next turn with your Deathbringer. Things like that are just, simple. It's not like fancy plays, but they're just like good things you can do in a high utility warband like this. Certainly Spire Tyrants are not quite as good as they were before, but this is still pretty reasonable and pretty solid, and I think you're going to win a lot of games with a game like this. I think this is just generally a great home for whatever your favorite triple is in Chaos. Though I will end up finding, when I was preparing this video, I ended up finding that a lot of these warbands are a good home for your favorite triple. So just keep this one in mind as a solid one as we kind of go through this video and the other warbands available to you. Now we're on Corvus Cabal. Corvus Cabal is one of the 2 solved ones in this list, so I'm not going to go into it too much. Ever since the Shrike Talon got buffed and battle traits came in, the only real debate has been, do you do 3 versus 2 Shrike Talons? You're not going to bring in allies for Corvus Cabal because, why would you? They don't host allies better than any of the other warbands do. Like Spire Tyrants host allies way better than Corvus Cabal do, right? Untamed Beasts, they have ally combos that Corvus Cabal doesn't have, right? So instead, the battle trait makes your Shrike Talons way better, and so the question is, do you want to run 2 or do you want to run 3? 2 has generally been more successful than 3 in events, but small sample size. You could say, hey, I'm going to go against the grain here and run 3 of them if you really wanted to. Just know that Corvus Cabal is really deployment dependent. So on every map where you set up, measure out all the deployments, and then don't just go like, I'm going to set up here because I'm sitting here. Make sure that you do the roll off so that if you win it, you can pick, just in case your opponent has like a friendlier setup on their side of the board for you, because you're going to want to start on terrain. Corvus Cabal, when they start on terrain or when they have a good path to terrain, are a completely different warband than when they start on the battlefield floor. It's kind of too bad sometimes to play something that swingy, but in general, they do function decently well, but just you really want to be on terrain or have a good path to terrain. So you really want, every time you play, you want to look at the deployments, roll off with your opponent, hope that you win, and pick the one where you are going to have the best terrain set up for your guys. So here's kind of the missionary position, Crow's warband, 174, the Shadow Piercer, who's a bit of a tax, but like she's not terrible. I think if she was 160 points, you'd be pretty happy for that deal. So you're really only paying 10 deadweight points there. Then you've got your 2 Shrike Talons. They are really solid. They are kind of the best thing that you are doing. More would be great, except that they, they eat each other's dice. They really want to be using dice, and so 3 hasn't been as successful. But then you're going to have a Spire Stalker, just because it's nice to have at least one 15 health fighter who doesn't get one shot and who can do real damage. Then I want 2 of the sort of Spear Cabalists, which have 2-inch range, and then 3 of the regular Cabalists that just run around with 8 wounds and die. But they die for a cause, right? To kind of tie opponents up until your Shrike Talons can clean them up. I'd love to present you with something wacky, but the battle trait here is so much better than anything else you can do in the Warband that I think you're kind of tied into it. So, I find warbands like this a little bit less inspiring than others, but I know other people really like just like the pure flavor, and so that's really cool. I would do something crazy, but I'm not just gonna like post a shit list for no reason. So this is what you should play. You can try 3 Shrike Talons if you want, but it's not as good. So at least if you play Corvus Cabal that this is tried and true. A lot of people have brought this to events and done, perfectly fine 2 and 2. I think it has a couple 3-1s. This exact list or something like it has gone to a lot of events and, always been fine. The Unmade. I really wish Flaying Frenzy were better. The Joyous one, which is I kind of think, in my opinion, the coolest one. Honestly, he's the one jumping off some terrain. The leader, I just find the leader to be a little over designed. So I think the Joyous one's the one that like communicates the concept the best to me, and he's like almost good enough. At 140 points, it's like just a little bit too much, but it's really doing what the Warband wants to do in terms of having 15 health and being able to do some real damage, but the horde clearing ability just is too swingy and weird, and it doesn't actually clear hordes, and so then it's like, what is he doing? And he's way too many points. At like 125, I'd be really happy to take him with the current ability, but otherwise, no. More generally for this warband, durability is a real problem. They're completely reliant on just like netting things. That's the only way they can survive, is if you net something and then your opponent just takes their next threat and kills one of your guys, and then hopefully you net their third biggest thing and you just don't whiff on either of them. Otherwise, you're just going to lose all your pieces right away, which can be a little tough. This is another warband that if the opponent has any shooting, so they're immune to nets, you're just going to fall down immediately. And I think it's too bad because it's not the most compelling gameplay, in my opinion, but the models are incredible, so I think a lot of people are going to want to play these guys. They pop up from time to time. This is another one that, because you're full of nets, you have a lot of incentive to import a cool triple. I know that the leader uses a cool triple, but you don't want to hang everything on the leader because he usually dies quick. So what I would do is we're just torturing. All our fighters are nets or we're teleporting, which some people love teleporting. I love teleporting. Some people are like, ugh, I hate having to keep track of where you could be at any given time. So that's why this is called torture. We're going to play a blissful one. Then we're going to play Kagra's friends. So Kagra, her sister, and then Razik, which is just one more guy that her sister can teleport. You want to have these toughness 6 door stops to put wherever you want to keep your unmade guys alive, and then that way your blissful one can actually do its work, which is the work is try to roll crits. I can't believe that I didn't put the thing in the right place, but this is a control list. I had a whole poem here about the torture skit from Wu-Tang, but you're going to put their nuts on a dresser and hit them with a spiked bat here. That's how it should feel playing against a warband like this. You should probably lean into it. That's what the Unmade would do. I mean, look at them. They're here for that. So net them as much as you can and then teleport to the places they wish they could be with people who aren't going to die once they finally catch up to you. That's your plan. Cypher Lords. Cypher Lords have the same survivability problem as Unmade. Even worse because they don't have nets. And their toughness 3 10 wound chaff is 70 points, which is a really tough place to be. But pinpoint mid-sized damage is kind of better than it used to be. I think the Onslaught Rampage nerf is just like a very subtle buff to the kinds of things that Cypher Lords are interested in doing. As far as teleporting a Mirror Blade into combat with something that has already gone, and then just rolling a bunch of dice at it. 10-4-2-4 on a triple is actually a plan now. Now that Onslaught and Rampage are gone, you can kind of rely on this, and maybe not rely on it, but you can use this and be happy with it much more easily now than you could, which is kind of cool. That's not me saying that Cypher Lords are really good. That's me saying that, they have more play than they used to, even though I think they're still really, really, really bad. So this list is called Fancy Freaks. This is actually not that different from Torture in terms of we are just bringing in some holding pieces. You're seeing that a lot with some of these factions. It's just we're going to bring something tough that's hard to kill to kind of give like a steadying rock here. But you're going to have your Thrallmaster, and then Fecula Flyblown, Gulgotch the Butcher, 4 Mindbound, and then 2 Mirror Blades, 1 of each, because this fits out to exactly 1,000 points. Unlike with Unmade, which want holding pieces that use a great triple, Cypher Lords already has a great triple, and so Cypher Lords is the place where you import your favorite doubles in Chaos. And so, you know, for example, Cypher Lords with a Slangor Slaycorn would be really fun. It also dies really fast, so I wouldn't do it, but it would be really fun. So Fecula and Gulgotch can both use Spurting Mucus, which is a new double for Nurgle that is really good in terms of the amount of damage it can put onto an opponent. If Fecula is holding a treasure, your opponent is in a lot of trouble. Gulgotch can't hold treasures, but what he can do is go up to a treasure carrier and pin them down, get them in combat, and they're not going to kill him, right? Because he's just going to use his double to make it so that they die too. So they're just stuck there. You know, they can't move, which is just a great use for Gulgotch. Winning here is still going to revolve around finding the highest leverage use for your Mirror Blades. Those Mirror Blades are tough to use. You know, that profile is so hard to balance because it can be teleported anywhere and do a ton of damage, but also it's only got 10 health and you're paying 120 points for it. So you're going to need to keep them in the back until the Thrallmaster can teleport them into combat where they can double move, so that even though they move 5, which is nice, you really don't want to be using move actions with them. You don't want to be putting them into a place where they're vulnerable. I actually really like the theme of this list, though, in terms of these fancy freaks, mostly because it reminds me of The Cat Returns from Studio Ghibli. That's what this still is from. It's like a world of really fancy cats, except their king is like a complete freak and like so gross. It's got a little bit of those Slaanesh vibes with the Slaanesh guy on the palanquin. I think they might have actually taken this movie as their inspiration for that guy. But, you know, we're using Nurgle people because that's easier to represent here. But it's really those vibes of like a couple real freaks, real nasty weirdos surrounded by the fanciest people you know. Next, I'm going to get into Iron Golems. They are also really big losers from the Onslaught and Rampage nerfs. Their whole sort of battle trait build was basically we rampage on 6s. So every rampage is a 6, which was really pretty solid. You'd see Iron Golems doing well from time to time. What's left after the nerf? You still have the great 1v1 threat. The Breacher really misses Onslaught. It really liked, you know, because of that high strength, the 4-8 damage. It really liked onslaughting all the time. But even without onslaughting, it can still brawl. It can take up a blessing and still gain a lot of value. The 10-point nerf to +1 attack blessings makes them kind of weak now on like 3-5 profiles, which before I was like really happily taking a Stormcast hero and putting +1 attack on it and just not looking back. Now you're going to hesitate a lot more before you do something like that, but on 4-8 profiles it's still insane. So just don't hesitate on something like an Ogre Breacher. Don't hesitate to put that blessing on it because that is still pretty incredible. Unlike most of the bespoke warbands, Iron Golems has solid durability. They've got the Iron Legionaries with shields, which are 12 wounds, toughness 5 for just 75 points. Super reasonable. And so you can put a lot of beef onto the board and just dare your opponent to try to clear it, and that can be kind of a fun playstyle for some folks. You don't really have any abilities, so this is another one of those warbands where you're going to import your favorite dice abilities, but here it's not just triples, it's anything. The Drill Master has that ability that some people try to use. It's not good. I just need to tell you, it's not good. She does have the move 5, so like if you're building pure, that can be kind of decent because her ability goes off on a 6. She becomes like very, very needed in those pure builds because then you need the speed, right? Because you don't have anything, you're just super slow. Otherwise, she has the move 5. But other than those sort of pure battle trait builds, which have taken a huge hit with the lack of rampage, I don't really think you need her. I think that her role can be filled by allies. I wish the Prefector and the Signifer were a little bit more interesting. Unfortunately, they just kind of don't do stuff. You still have good memes with Iron Golems, by the way, so Sloppity Bilepiper and 2 Armators is still like a really sweet deployment to use, or like Sloppity Bilepiper and like 5 Armators all over your list, right, is also a pretty sweet meme that is much more effective than most meme lists often are. The way I would want to see Iron Golems played if I was going to do it is this kind of, I'm calling it Rust Buckets, but Nurgle marked Iron Golems. You're going to have a Dominar. You're going to bring in Skabic Plague Seeker because you want that speed, right? And like I said before, the Drill Master just isn't as good as some of the options that you can get to in Chaos, and so this is one of those options, is Skabic. And then you're going to have that Ogre Breacher who absolutely brawls with +1 attack, and then Itchit, who is like baby Skabic. It's not as good, but it can still do all the stuff and give Skabic like a little bit more utility, and it can still poison objectives, use all the same dice things that Skabic can. And then you're going to have 4 Iron Legionaries who are just standing there going, hey, I'm really hard to kill. I've got toughness 5 and 12 wounds, and I'm happy about it. That's just great to have, and it can give you a lot of staying power all the time. So this is kind of a classic list, honestly, and it's kind of a throwback to an earlier, more simple time. You've got the massive brawler, you've got a few threats, you've got some chaff, and you've just got like one isolated place where you're going to spend your dice every single turn. I think this is really sweet. I actually have all these fighters. I think I might run this locally sometime, because I think this is a pretty sweet way to play Warcry. This is kind of like platonic ideal Warcry, in my opinion. Tarantulas Brood, aesthetically, is such a cool example of what Warcry and AOS could be, but just aren't. I really like the aesthetic. I mean, it's not necessarily for me personally, but I like how ambitious it is. I mean, this Warband is so crazy. I don't know how many times really they've done something this crazy, but the fact that they can and they don't is just, pure cowardice. Anyway, Tarantulas Brood is sweet. On the table, what they do is they have nets, they can swarm, and they can res, which is really funny because it's 3 of the 4 most NPE things in the game. I think it's really hard to build Tarantulas Brood in a way that feels like you're doing things that are encouraged by the mechanics and not just make a warband that's awful to play against, and that all your opponents will hate. None of them will tell you that they hate it because people are too polite, but they will hate it. It's horrible. That said, I still think people should play them more. They barely get played at all, and GW needs to know how terrible some of their mechanics in Warcry are. At this point, this game is too old to continue like being built off of nets and resurrections and just like shit that is awful to play against. And Tarantulas combines all of it. More people should play them just to prove the point to GW. Spiders, when you look at them versus other 50-point chaff, they've only got the toughness 1, comparing to Noblars. That can sometimes matter. But they've got the extra move and they've got the extra attacks, and you can resurrect them to get them in the way of stuff. The battle trait gives you a free one. They do so much more than any other 50-point chaff does. And that gives you a real playstyle to kind of play around. This, I would say, has been mostly solved in terms of how you're supposed to build Tarantulas. Itan's list from a year ago is still legal. You can see him talk about it on the Off-Meta Musings channel. You'll have to dig for the video. It's about a year old. But that everything there is still legal. They didn't get nerfed. They should have. There have been 2 FAQs since then that should have nerfed Tarantulas Brood, but not enough people are playing them, so they're not nerfing them. If you care about winning events, you should play them. 15 bodies, just kind of rolls around, super easy. Here's the net list in case you were wondering. It's a Broodmaster. It's 2 Doomweavers with net. It says 210 as if 1 Doomweaver with net costs 210. It's actually 105 each, so there's 2 of them. And then just 12 Spiders. Again, like Corvus Cabal, I'm not going to just give you some kind of goofy, shitty version just for fun. This is the way you should build Tarantulas. There isn't any real question about that. In general, just if you like a faction and something seems fun, just netlist. It's fine. Like, people stigmatize netlisters, and I don't get it. Like, I come from Magic the Gathering, where people stopped stigmatizing netlisters like in 2005, and so it's just so strange to me that people still do it in the Warhammer community. I think it's so toxic. It's a lot of people like masquerading as if they're being like as if they're like defending the honor of list building, but like not everyone likes list building. Just let them net list when they want to. Yeah, it's crazy to me. There is lots of cute, silly things that you can do with Tarantula's Brood that aren't this, but none of them are good, so just don't do them. Do this instead. Simple. Scions of the Flame. I love Scions. They have one of the worst leader taxes. The Blazing Lord is just like the classic unplayable chaos non-brawler. I'm starting to call them the chaos posers. They're just these like 190 to 230 point heroes in chaos that like pretend to be brawlers and just are not. They are just so embarrassing on the table. And unfortunately, the Blazing Lord is one of the chiefs of those. There are also a lot of fun specialists in Scions of the Flame who are not good. So Beheading Strike is just not worth using, even in like a post-onslaught world. Yeah, don't do it. And then the Immolator and the Inferno Priest are fun, and you can play them. They're just not like good, right? So definitely only ever bring one. The quad is kind of funny. If you get like a high value quad, it can be cool, but it's kind of just cool. It's not that great. The Inferno Priest compares very poorly to Vastus, who is 5 points cheaper and has a much better ability and just does more. Is just going to be better in your list all the time. So that's kind of that. The Immolator is the classic, like the Joyous one has the same issue from Unmade, where the horde clearing ability doesn't really clear hordes all that often. If you're rolling 4 dice, then you're for sure going to get a 5-up and you're going to do real damage with it. But in general, it's not that impressive. Sorry, this isn't the one that's on 5-ups, but it's still like, this is the one where the EV becomes good when you're doing it against 4 fighters. But again, your odds of getting against 4 fighters, even against a horde, like they'll see the Immolator and they'll just avoid that part of the board. At least the Immolator does have move 5, so you can move 10 inches into something, deal some damage, and then they collapse on you and kill you. It does something, but it's not like good. If the Immolator was 10 points cheaper, I'd be much happier with it. What's cool about this warband, and is something that has been kind of a guiding light from this channel from the very beginning, that I've always had a hard time communicating to people, is that the profiles make the playstyles a lot of the time. And here is one of the best examples of that, where the chaff gives you a playstyle. The leader is not very good at much, but he has 2-inch range and he has toughness 5, and he can stand in the way while chaff hide behind him, and then your opponent, when they curl around to hit the chaff, he's still in range of being able to hit them. So it kind of creates this geometric playstyle where you position your 3-inch reach right behind your big guy. They can hit over the top of him, and then they have tiny bases so that he can hit over the top of them. The 3-inch reach is really good. They have the best damage per point of any of the 3-inch reach Chaos Chaff. So while Slaves to Darkness and Claws of Karanak can both do this same playstyle, and they are kind of better at it for other reasons, like they can achieve other things on the board and then also morph into this playstyle at the same time. This is kind of the sort of purely focused version of it, where you are going to stand a Blazing Lord, a Chaos Lord, and a Lord of Plagues, 3 lords, in like one section each, like one deployment each, and then each of them is going to have 2 initiates behind it, and then 4 wounds for the Blazing Lord, because the Wounds Blessing combos with toughness 5 really nicely. The Chaos Lord gets +1 crit because you have the points left over. The Lord of Plagues gets +1 attacks because that's kind of necessary on the Lord of Plagues. And then you have, 3 holding pieces to kind of move forward, and then the little initiates running behind them. It's going to be rare that you actually set up the thing where both initiates are standing behind the big guys, but you're going to be playing the mission with that geometry in mind and going back to it and then dispersing out of it and then going back to it again later. You kind of have these kind of star bursting actions as you move around the board, but you're wanting to set up your team fights to always be in that structure. It's a very interesting geometry puzzle. It's one of the most fun ways to kind of play the game, in my opinion, is these kinds of sort of on-board puzzles where you get hyper rewarded for getting the positioning right, but then you get punished for not getting it right. I like these a lot better than like lists that require good abilities to work, and like if you don't get the right initiative roll, you're just sad. But if you get the wrong deployments and your opponent can blow up your geometry really easily, or you can't do all of the mission objectives while also holding your form, that can go wrong as well. So there's a lot kind of there going on. I made a playlist for Scions of the Flame a while ago, so here it is in case you want to listen to it. But one thing that makes me sad about this is where if you have the Chaos Lord with +1 crit and the Blazing Lord with +4 wounds, you have the exact same profile. They have the same attack profile, the same toughness, the same move. The only difference is the Chaos Lord has much better abilities and it has 1 more wound. So it's also paying 30 fewer points, in case you wanted to know how bad the Blazing Lord is. That is how bad he is. So anyway, this is Scions of the Flame. They're sweet. Let's talk about Dark Oath Savagers. One of the few ability specialists in this whole group that can actually really ball is the God Speaker. The God Speaker is great. It's got a little shooting attack at a very reasonable price. It's got the double to potentially farm wild dice. The entire Tyrannic cohort suite of things that they do was entirely inspired by this God Speaker a few years prior. Proven are almost good enough for competitive play. They're totally fine in casual play, which is great. It's because they've got the 15 wounds each, which is really wonderful to see. If the battle trait were just a little bit better, I'd be super jazzed about them. Or if they were just 10 points cheaper, each of them. They're overcosted, but they're tempting and they're cool, and if you want to play them, you absolutely can. This video, the guiding light is to give you something that's going to be good and functional on the tabletop, which having a bunch of proven won't be, but I'm just saying that if you want to play them in your casual games, you absolutely can. Most of the ability specialists in this video, I've basically said don't touch them, but these proven, you can mess around with them if you want to. The reaction is worth talking about. I haven't talked about many of these reactions. Even some of the better ones, like Scions of the Flame, have a reasonable one. But what's cool about this one is that you can wait until after the rolls to see if you need it. So you don't have to, they attack and then you say, oh, I'll react. Or like if you forget, it's fine. Like if you forget and then they roll like 10 crits, you're like, oh, I guess I do want to react. And that's actually legal here because the reaction is written so that you can wait until after the rolls are made, which is great. The Slaughterborn is the one leader in Chaos who's actually interesting and good at brawling and is a bespoke leader. He doesn't have a lot of wounds, so he does die quick, but he will usually get a kill before he does, so just make sure that kill is something that's worthwhile. If he kills something that is worth more than 100 points and then he dies, that's usually worth it. The concept of like something needing to kill its points to achieve its points is not right, because that's not how like actions and activations and scoring points on the board works. So if you kill like 150 points worth of models with your Slaughterborn, and then they kill your Slaughterborn using like multiple actions from expensive things, your Slaughterborn did its job, and he is very good at doing that job. He's also nice at clearing chaff because he has the act on kill double, and he's very good at killing chaff because of his 3-5 profile. I think he's like 4-6-3, or Yeah, 4635, I think. So he kills Chaff, and then he uses a double. He's basically like an Annihilator, but with move 4, which is nice. Annihilators are way cheaper than him, but he's got the strength, and yeah, he's very good. He's not a tax, which is great. So he's one of the few and proud non-tax leaders. Him and the True Blood get to stand together. I've got a little list called Savage Mystics with Darko Savagers. I actually have them painted. The Slaughterborn, a Lord of Hubris, Mindstealer Spheranx, God Speaker, 3 Glory Seekers with Spear, and 1 Glory Seeker with the Shield. The Spheranx is fun with them because they really like dice-hungry friends, because the God Seeker can sort of farm wild dice in round 1. Hopefully you've got an extra one now, and then you can use it to, to boost up these dice hungry allies. Lord of Hubris is super dice hungry. He, is very good at chaff clearing though. He's really good at mid-range clearing too. Like he's really good at clearing Chaos Warrior type fighters, or just like various 100-point things off the board, or like against Stormcast. Not against Reclusian Chamber, but against the like cheaper Stormcast. Like if they've got like a couple Liberators in their Thunderstrike thing, Lord of Hubris is really good against those things. Basically anything that's not going to kill him when he procs his ability off of them. And then the leader's kind of hitting power here puts less pressure on your allies to be all offense all the time. And so you get to have these kind of fancy allies like the Spheranx, like the Lord of Hubris. The Spheranx is a mild winner from the Onslaught and Rampage nerfs, in that the sort of primacy of Titans in the game, like before it was just kind of embarrassing to be using the Mindstealer Spheranx when you could either be spending more points on one of these guys, or later, even after this guy got nerfed, you could spend about the same points on like a Bulgor with +1 attack, and that was going to be providing good utility, like, just offensive doubles, and then also just doing more damage than the Mindstealer does. But now that that's kind of like all damage all the time is less attractive, having the net and, the burn spell and the weird quad, like now that there's no rampages, it's kind of nice to have a really good quad that wasn't as good as Rampage, but is still solid. So like that's something where, yeah, the Bulgor for 5 more points is better at offense, but the Spheranx, you can still kind of run it, and you can get a quad per round, and the Spheranx is going to go crazy with the quad, and your Bulgor would instead just be thinking about how it's not allowed to Rampage anymore. So you can kind of run those Spheranxes a little bit happier now than you used to be able to, which is kind of cool. You can also replace those spears with shields. I do think the spear is good, but you can replace them with shields if you want to replace the Lord of Hubris or the Mindstealer with a more expensive piece, like a more offensive piece. You can absolutely still do that. You can free up like a decent number of points. You can also use the really bad one with only 2 attacks. Not sure I'd recommend that, but you can do it, and that frees up even more points because it's only 65. So that is every single Chaos First Edition bespoke. And after having done all of them, I wanted to just talk a little bit about kind of the state of the First Edition warbands. Yes, they were all squatted, not all of them. Darko Savagers is still around. So they're hard to buy, but they're really cool. And a lot of people still have them, as leftovers from when they got into First Edition. But the kind of design philosophy that went into all of them is a bit tough now, and I think that the Onslaught and Rampage nerf have actually exposed even more flaws than before. Like 2 years ago, it was kind of a meme that like if you wanted to play one of those Chaos factions, you just stuck in a FOMO Crusher, and that was it. And you could still do that with Varangard now if you wanted to, like I said at the beginning of the video. But heavy hitters don't really have their force multipliers in general, so there's going to be fewer of them on boards in Warcry in general. Now, of course, again, the Varangard does have one, but most of them don't. So then that's supposed to open things up for things like these warbands, right? But none of them have really high leverage doubles and triples to replace Onslaught and Rampage with. A lot of them were built with Onslaught and Rampage in mind. And so, onslaughting your one, your Bestigor or your Ogre Breacher or your Slaughterborn, onslaughting those things was supposed to be how you got your offense. And then, you know, the Chaos allies were all ridiculous rampagers, and they were packaged with the game as if you are supposed to put them in your lists. And so that makes it so that the specialists are really just doing like corner case little things here and there. And yeah, they're underpointed, but or like overpointed, but that's kind of the vision of how they're supposed to work, right? Now, the fact that their power level is all really low, was a separate thing, but that was the vision, right? But now that you can't get the onslaught offense off of them, and you can't sort of bring in just one big rampager, the new thing is you have to just bring in the best triple in chaos or the best double in chaos, depending on what your warband has. Like if you've got nets, you need to bring in whatever you think is the best triple in chaos. If you don't have nets, you have to bring in whatever you think is the best double in chaos. And that's kind of just the new way to build all of these bespoke factions. I think most people will find that more compelling as gameplay, which is cool. And you can always just say fuck it and do a Varangard if you aren't in that camp. But it has really exposed just like how naive some of the abilities in these are compared to what's been built for like every recent AOS expansion or every Underworlds team that's come out, and like everything that's come out since then, like in the back half of second edition, is just like so much more impactful on the board than kind of the abilities that are available to most of these warbands. Which is both cool from a design point and kind of disappointing from their perspective, because I don't think that these factions are really getting the TLC from FAQs that they really deserve. And that Onslaught and Rampage nerf came through, and none of the fighters in these factions that aren't that good, that were relying on those, really got attention. So, for example, I think most of the bespoke leaders are built with the idea that they might be using Onslaught or Rampage some of the time. And so I think a lot of the bespoke leaders really should be coming down in points a little bit. I think a lot of the specialists kind of need a points drop too, because their abilities are built to be these little like corner case cool applications on a fighter that you're going to be using anyway. And now this has been a problem way before Onslaught and Rampage, so I won't tie those at all together. But basically those specialists, their profiles are not good enough on their own that you would play them. And then the ability is so much lower impact than anything that newer factions are doing. So there's a really tough situation where like you could fix them with points, and you'd make them like efficient profiles that also have a corner case ability. And I think that that's really compelling. You could also rewrite the abilities to be just more impactful. And I think you get like maybe a 50-50 hit rate with that. Like if I look at the last couple FAQs and all the new fighters that came through, half of them are kind of cool and half of them are just like overwritten and awkward. And so, if half of the ability specialists all of a sudden became cool and half of them stayed shit, that'd be certainly a much better situation than we're currently in. But, that's kind of what the state of things are. I also think that there's a lot of things in these warbands that, if they were actually good, would just be awful to play against. Like if tons of people were playing Tarantulos, Warcry wouldn't be a game worth playing. If tons of people were playing Unmade, Warcry would suck. So I think that some of these you don't want them to be really, really good. But the ones that are kind of harmless, I would love to see them get some love. I know that they've been kind of squatted and they're not going to be a part of the future of Warcry, so I wouldn't suggest anybody go out and buy any of these. but it would be nice to give them a little bit of love as, you know, the current state of Warcry kind of fades off into the distance. That's a subject for a complete other video. But just in general, right? If these are part of our game, it would be cool to see them be a more interesting part of the game. That said, you know, like half the videos I put, or half the lists I put in this video are like pretty appropriate to take to a tournament if you're hoping to like go 3-1 with a meme list or a meme faction, and so that's kind of an okay place. So I hope you try these out, and may all your rolls be crits.